I died on my 27th birthday, not from cake or champagne or any of the usual celebratory hazards. I died from stress-induced cardiac arrest in a roach-infested studio apartment in the worst part of town, evicted from the beautiful loft I'd worked 3 jobs to afford, my credit destroyed, my savings gone, and my family's voices still ringing in my ears about how selfish I was. The last thing I saw was a water stain on the ceiling shaped like a hand reaching down. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes again was my childhood bedroom ceiling, unchanged since high school, with those glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck up there at 14 still arranged in a wonky approximation of Orion's belt. I was 23 again, 4 years before my death, 4 years before everything fell apart. I lay there for 3 days, calling in sick to the job I remembered having, trying to process the impossible. Testing it. The scar on my knee from when I fell off my bike at 8, still there. The chip in my front tooth from a high school basketball game, present. My phone, ancient by the standards of where I'd just been, showed the date. September 14th, 4 months before I signed the lease on the loft that would ruin my life. 4 months before my family convinced me to add her to it. Madison Parker, my cousin, my family's golden child. The reason I died alone and broken. I had 4 months to make sure it never happened again. The family dinner happened exactly as I remembered, down to my mother's pot roast being slightly overdone, and my father's tie having a small coffee stain near the bottom that he didn't notice. I sat at the same seat at my parents' dining room table, surrounded by the same people who would eventually contribute to my destruction, and I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. My mother, Patricia, had her hair in the same style, that short bob she'd worn since the 90s that she thought made her look like Sharon Stone, but really just made her look like every other suburban mom at the grocery store. My father, Harold, was already on his second beer, which meant he'd be agreeable to whatever my mother wanted by the time dessert rolled around. My older brother, Kyle, sat across from me with his wife, Jennifer, both of them wearing that same expression of smug superiority they'd perfected over years of being the family's success story. And then there was Madison. She sat next to Jennifer, her honey blonde hair in perfect waves, her makeup flawless, her outfit probably costing more than my monthly grocery budget. She was 25 to my 23, and she'd spent our entire lives being everything I wasn't: beautiful, charming, effortlessly graceful, and perpetually in need of rescue. Looking at her now, knowing what I knew, I felt my hands clench under the table. In my first life, I hadn't known what she really was. I'd seen the surface, the struggling artist, the victim of bad luck, the sweet cousin who just needed one more chance. I'd believed every word, every tear, every promise. This time, I saw the calculation in her eyes, the way she assessed every room for what she could take from it, the practiced vulnerability that made everyone want to protect her. I saw the monster wearing my cousin's face. "So, Jenna," my mother began, and I braced myself because I knew what was coming. 4 years of future memories meant I knew every word of this conversation. "Madison has some exciting news." Madison ducked her head in that way she had, like she was embarrassed by attention even as she soaked it in like sunlight. "It's not that exciting, Aunt Patty." "Nonsense," my mother beamed. "Tell everyone about the gallery." Here we go, I thought, the first lie. "Well," Madison said, glancing around the table with practiced timing, "you know I've been working on my photography series about urban decay and renewal." I did know. In my first life, I'd been captivated by it. The way she talked about art, about capturing the soul of the city, about finding beauty in abandoned places. It had seemed so profound. I'd spent hours looking at her portfolio, convinced I was seeing genius. Now I knew the truth. She'd stolen half those photos from actual photographers on Instagram, run them through filters, and claimed them as her own. The Urban Decay series was just pictures of the same condemned warehouse from 12 different angles. "The Morrison Gallery wants to feature my work," Madison continued, her voice breathy with false modesty. "It's a huge opportunity. They're talking about a solo show in the spring." The table erupted in congratulations. Jennifer clapped her hands together. Kyle raised his beer in a toast. My father nodded approvingly, even though he'd once told me my own college art minor was a waste of tuition money. I said nothing. "The thing is," Madison said, and I watched her set the trap I'd fallen into before, The gallery is downtown, and my current place is almost an hour away with traffic. I'd need to be closer for all the prep work, the meetings with collectors, the installation. She trailed off, biting her lip in that way that made her look like a lost puppy. My mother turned to me with that expression I knew all too well, the one that said I was about to be volunteered for something. "Jenna, didn't you just sign a lease on that new place downtown?" And there it was. In my first life, I'd been so proud of that loft. It was my first real apartment, the first place that was truly mine. I'd worked 3 jobs for 6 months to save up for the deposit. I'd furnished it piece by piece from thrift stores and Facebook Marketplace, turning it into something beautiful. It had exposed brick and huge windows and original hardwood floors that I'd refinished myself during a weekend that left my hands blistered and my back aching. It was my sanctuary, my achievement, proof that I could make something of myself. And in my first life sitting at this exact table, I'd made the mistake of admitting it. "I did," I said carefully, my voice neutral. "How many bedrooms?" my mother asked, even though she already knew. She'd helped me move in, had spent the whole time criticizing my decorating choices and pointing out flaws in the building. 2. "Perfect!" My mother's smile widened. "Madison could take the second bedroom, just until she gets on her feet with the gallery. It would be so much easier for her, and you'd have help with the rent." I felt every eye at the table turn to me, and I knew what they saw. The same thing they'd always seen. The plain one, the quiet one, the one who should be grateful for any scrap of attention or connection. The one whose needs came last. "I don't think—" I started. "Oh, Jenna, don't be selfish," Jennifer interrupted, her voice dripping with syrupy disapproval. "Madison's talking about a real career opportunity here. You of all people should understand how hard it is for artists to make it." The implication was clear. You of all people who failed at your own artistic dreams and settled for a boring office job. You of all people who should be grateful someone as special as Madison would even want to live with you. In my first life, that comment had stung. It had made me feel small and petty for even hesitating. I'd swallowed my reservations, told myself it would only be for a few months, convinced myself that helping family was the right thing to do. Now I wanted to reach across the table and dump Jennifer's wine in her lap. "It would just be temporary," Madison added, her blue eyes wide and pleading. 3 months max, just until I get my first commission check from the gallery. I'd pay you back, of course. She wouldn't. I knew she wouldn't because she never had. In my first life, 3 months had turned into 6, then 9, then a year. The commission checks never materialized because there was no gallery show. The Morrison Gallery had never even heard of Madison Parker when I desperately called them, trying to understand where all my money had gone. "I'm sure you two would have so much fun," my mother pushed. "Living together, both young and single in the city, you could look out for each other." Look out for each other. What a joke. In my first life, Madison had thrown parties that resulted in noise complaints. She'd borrowed my clothes without asking and returned them stained or stretched. She'd eaten my food, used my toiletries, run up the utility bills with her hour-long showers and her habit of leaving every light on. She'd brought home strange men at all hours. She'd stolen cash from my wallet, just 20s here and there, small enough that I convinced myself I was miscounting. And when the lease came up for renewal, she'd forged my signature on an extension and stopped paying her half of the rent entirely. By the time I realized what was happening, we were 3 months behind. The landlord started eviction proceedings. I begged, I pleaded, I promised to pay everything we owed. I took out credit cards and a payday loan with interest rates that should have been criminal. I stopped eating regular meals. I sold everything I owned of value. It wasn't enough. The eviction went on my record, my credit score plummeted, I couldn't rent anywhere decent, and the places that would take me were overpriced slums. I lost my job because I could no longer afford a car, and the bus route from my new place made me late too many times. I maxed out my credit cards. The payday loans spawned more payday loans, each with worse terms than the last. And Madison? She moved back in with her parents, the ones who'd mysteriously never had room for her when she needed a place to stay. She told everyone I'd kicked her out without warning, that I'd been jealous of her success, that I'd stolen some of her photography equipment to sell. My family believed her. Every word. When I'd tried to explain what really happened, my mother had accused me of trying to ruin Madison's reputation. My father had said I needed to take responsibility for my own choices. Kyle had told me I was acting paranoid and unstable. No one helped me. No one believed me. And 4 years later, I died alone. But not this time. This time, I had something I didn't have before. Knowledge. I knew Madison's secrets. I knew about the evictions she'd racked up before she came to me. 3 of them, in 3 different cities, all for the same reasons. Unpaid rent, property damage, lease violations. I knew about the credit card fraud investigation in Portland that had been quietly dropped when her parents paid restitution. I knew about the restraining order her ex-boyfriend had filed in Seattle. I knew all of it because in my first life, in my desperate attempt to understand what had gone wrong, I'd hired a background check service with money I couldn't afford. The report had arrived 2 weeks before I died, and I'd read it in that roach-infested studio, crying over every page, realizing I'd never had a chance of winning. But that was before. This time, I wasn't the desperate victim scrambling to understand. This time, I was the one with the advantage. I just had to use it correctly. I need to think about it, I said finally, ignoring my mother's immediate frown of disapproval. Think about what? Kyle interjected. It's family, Jenna. You help family. I help family all the time, I replied, keeping my voice even. I helped Mom with her computer issues last week. I covered your anniversary dinner when Jennifer forgot her wallet. I drove Dad to his colonoscopy at 5 a.m. I'm not refusing to help. I'm asking for time to think. The table went quiet. This was new. In my first life, I'd been a doormat, so conditioned to pleasing everyone that I'd agreed to anything. This version of me, with 4 years of suffering and death in her memory, had a spine. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. Well, I suppose we can't force you. The way she said it, though, made it clear she expected me to be forced. By guilt, by obligation, by the invisible weight of family expectations that had pressed down on me my entire life. I'll think about it, I repeated. I'll let you know by the end of the week. Madison's expression flickered, just for a second, but I caught it. Calculation. She was already planning her next move, the next angle of attack. Good. Let her plan. I was planning too. The background check arrived in my email 3 days later. I'd ordered it the morning after the dinner, using a different service than I'd used in my first life. This one was faster, more thorough, and most importantly, provided a certified report that could be used for tenant screening. I sat at my desk in my small studio apartment, the one I'd kept as my primary residence while using the loft as my official address for mail, and read through 32 pages of Madison, Parker's history. It was worse than I remembered. The evictions I knew about, Portland, Seattle, and Phoenix. What I hadn't known, what hadn't been in the report I'd ordered before, was the 4th eviction in Sacramento. So recent, it had barely made it into the system. She'd been kicked out just 6 weeks ago. There was also a small claims court judgment against her in Oregon for $4,500 in unpaid rent and damages. A default judgment, which meant she'd never even bothered to show up to court. Credit card fraud in Portland, as I remembered, but also a bad check charge in Phoenix that had been dismissed on a technicality. 2 restraining orders, not one. The Seattle ex-boyfriend and a former roommate in Sacramento who'd accused Madison of harassment and threats after their falling out. And then there was the part that made my blood run cold. A police report from Phoenix, filed by a landlord alleging that Madison had been running an unlicensed Airbnb out of her rental unit without permission, pocketing thousands of dollars while the landlord received noise complaints and property damage reports. This was who my family wanted me to add to my lease. This was who I'd trusted in my first life. I printed out the entire report, 3 copies, and put them in separate folders. Then I opened my email and composed a message. Dear Mr. Chen, I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to reach out regarding a potential situation with my lease at 447 Morrison Street, Unit 3B. My family has been pressuring me to add a relative to my lease as a co-tenant. Before I make any decision, I wanted to understand the building's policy on tenant additions and what screening process would be required. I believe strongly in protecting both my own interests and those of the property. Could you please let me know what steps would be involved in such a request? Thank you for your time. Best regards, Jenna Morrison. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Daniel Chen owned the Building my loft was in, along with 3 other properties in the downtown area. In my first life, I'd barely interacted with him. He had a property manager who handled most tenant issues, and I'd always paid my rent on time, so we'd never had reason to communicate. What I remembered about him, though, was that he was meticulous. The lease I'd signed had been 12 pages long, single-spaced, covering every possible scenario. The tenant handbook was another 20 pages. He ran background checks on everyone, required proof of employment and income, checked references. It was that meticulousness that had destroyed me in my first life. When the eviction proceedings started, there was no mercy, no flexibility. The lease was the lease, and I'd violated it. The fact that Madison had forged my signature didn't matter. The fact that she'd been the one who stopped paying didn't matter. My name was on the lease, and I was responsible. But that same meticulousness was about to save me. Daniel Chen replied within 2 hours, "Ms. Morrison, thank you for reaching out. I appreciate tenants who think ahead. Any addition to a lease requires the same screening process as a new tenant. Background check, credit check, proof of employment and income, must demonstrate ability to pay their portion of rent at 3x monthly rate, and 3 references from previous landlords. The screening fee is $50, non-refundable. The process typically takes 5 to 7 business days. Both parties must sign the lease amendment, and the new tenant must pay a security deposit equal to 1 month's rent. Please note, our background screening includes criminal history, eviction history, credit score verification, and rental history verification. Any history of eviction, property damage, or lease violations may result in application denial. Let me know if you'd like to move forward with adding someone to your lease. Best regards, Daniel Chen, Property Management." I read the email 3 times, a smile spreading across my face. Perfect. Madison didn't have proof of employment. She'd been fired from her last job for stealing from the register. She didn't have income that could be verified. The gallery show was a fantasy, and her parents had been subsidizing her for years under the table. She definitely didn't have 3 landlord references who would say anything positive. And she had 4 evictions on her record. There was no universe in which Madison Parker would pass tenant screening for Daniel Chen's property. All I had to do was make her try. I waited until Sunday dinner to spring my trap. My family had Sunday dinners every week, a tradition my mother insisted on maintaining, even though Kyle and Jennifer lived 40 minutes away and usually showed up late and irritated. I'd skipped them when I could in my first life, making excuses, cherishing my freedom. This time, I showed up early with a store-bought pie and a smile. My mother was in the kitchen when I arrived, and her eyebrows rose in surprise. "You're actually on time." "Wouldn't miss it," I said cheerfully, setting the pie on the counter. "Is Madison coming?" "Of course. She's been staying in the guest room this week, having some issues with her current roommate." My mother's tone suggested the roommate was the problem, not Madison. I knew better. The roommate was probably the Sacramento landlord who just evicted her, or maybe she'd already burned through another living situation I didn't know about. "That's too bad," I said, my voice dripping with sympathy. "Actually, I'm glad she'll be here. I wanted to talk to her about the living arrangement." My mother's face lit up like I'd just announced I was donating a kidney. "You've decided to let her move in?" "I've been thinking about it," I said carefully, "but I wanted to go over some logistics first." This was the performance of my life. In my first life, I'd been genuine in my concerns, my hesitations. I'd been overruled, steamrolled, guilted into compliance. This time, I was playing a role, the reluctant but ultimately agreeable cousin, the one who could be convinced with the right pressure. Because I needed them to pressure me. I needed it to be their idea, their insistence, their demand that Madison be added to my lease. Madison appeared 20 minutes later, looking effortlessly put together in leggings and an oversized sweater that probably cost more than my entire outfit. She gave me a hug that felt like being embraced by a mannequin. All the right motions, none of the warmth. "Aunt Patty said you wanted to talk?" she asked, her voice soft and hopeful. "Yeah," I said. "Let's wait until everyone's here." Dinner was the usual chaos. My father complaining about work, Kyle talking about his latest promotion, Jennifer humble bragging about their upcoming vacation to Aruba. I ate my pot roast and waited for my moment. It came during dessert. "So," my mother said, setting down her fork with, purpose. Jenna, have you made a decision about Madison? All eyes turned to me. I took a breath, arranging my features into uncertainty. I've been thinking about it a lot, I began, and I want to help, I do. Madison's family, and if she's got this amazing opportunity with the gallery, I want to support that. Madison leaned forward, her eyes shining. In my first life, I'd thought that was genuine gratitude. Now I recognized it as the gleam of a predator spotting prey. But, I continued, I need to be smart about this. The loft is the first place I've ever really had to myself, and I worked really hard for it. So I looked into what it would take to add someone to the lease, and my landlord has some requirements. Requirements? Kyle frowned. It's your apartment. It's a rental, I corrected. I don't own it. And the landlord requires anyone added to the lease to go through the same screening process as a new tenant. Background check, credit check, proof of employment, and income. I watched Madison's face carefully. There, just a flicker of something. Alarm? Calculation? That seems excessive, Jennifer said. You're already living there. Why does it matter who else is on the lease? Liability, I explained, reciting what Daniel Chen had told me. If someone on the lease causes damage or doesn't pay rent, the landlord needs to know they can hold everyone accountable. It's pretty standard for downtown properties. Well, that should be no problem for Madison, my mother said firmly. She's got the gallery opportunity, excellent references from her previous landlords. Madison made a small noise in her throat. Actually, there might be a small issue. Everyone looked at her. It's so stupid, she said quickly, her voice taking on that breathy, overwhelmed quality. But my last landlord, the one in Sacramento, we had a misunderstanding about the lease terms. He claimed I owed back rent, but he was totally wrong about the dates. I had to move out because he was being completely unreasonable, and he might have filed an eviction notice. Which is crazy because I didn't actually get evicted, I just left, but it might show up on a background check. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. I wondered how many times she'd told variations of this story. That shouldn't matter, my father said. Jenna can just explain the situation to her landlord. I don't think that's how it works, Dad, I said. Mr. Chen is pretty strict about his screening criteria. He has to be. He owns multiple properties, and he's had issues with problem tenants before. So what are you saying? Kyle's voice had an edge to it. You won't help your own cousin because of some bureaucratic nonsense? This was it. The moment where, in my first life, I'd caved, where the combined weight of family expectation and guilt had crushed my resistance. I'm saying, I said carefully, that I can't just add Madison to the lease without going through the proper process. But I'm willing to try. We'll submit her application to Mr. Chen, and if she passes the screening, she's more than welcome to move in. Silence. It was perfect. I'd positioned myself as helpful and reasonable. I'd agreed to what they wanted. I'd made it Madison's problem, not mine. Well, that's settled then, my mother said, beaming. Madison can fill out the application, and I'm sure this will all be cleared up quickly. The misunderstanding with that Sacramento landlord won't be an issue once your Mr. Chen sees what an excellent tenant Madison will be. Madison's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course, I'm sure it'll be fine. But I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was trapped. If she refused to apply, she'd have to admit there was a problem with her background. If she applied, the screening would reveal all her evictions, the bad credit, the history of problems. And there was a third option, the one I was counting on. She could try to lie her way through it. I'll send you the application information tomorrow, I said sweetly. Mr. Chen's pretty quick with the processing, so we should know within a week. Perfect, Madison said. But her hands were clenched in her lap, knuckles white. Madison submitted her application on Tuesday. I knew because Mr. Chen forwarded me a copy, along with a brief email. Screening in progress. We'll have results by Friday. I also knew because Madison had clearly lied on it. The application asked for 3 previous landlord references, with contact information and rental dates. She'd provided 3 names and numbers. I didn't need to call them to know they were fake. Madison's rental history was a graveyard of burned bridges and evictions. No legitimate previous landlord would give her a positive reference. What she didn't know was that Daniel Chen didn't just call the references provided. He ran independent background checks that pulled eviction records, court judgments, credit reports. He cross-referenced addresses and dates. He was thorough to the point of paranoia. It was one of the things I'd hated about him in my first life, when his inflexibility had helped destroy me. Now it was my greatest weapon. I went about my week in a state of calm anticipation. I went to work at the marketing firm where I was a junior graphic designer, a job I'd lost in my first life, and was determined to keep this time. I responded to my mother's texts about Thanksgiving plans. I organized my loft, hanging curtains, and arranging furniture, claiming the space as fully mine in a way I'd never gotten to do before Madison invaded it. Friday morning, the email arrived. Ms. Morrison, I have completed the screening for Madison Parker's application to be added to your lease at 447 Morrison Street, Unit 3B. Unfortunately, I must deny this application. Ms. Parker's background check revealed multiple issues that violate our tenant qualification criteria. 4 evictions on record. Portland, OR, Seattle, WA, Phoenix, AZ, Sacramento, CA. Outstanding judgment for unpaid rent and damages. Fourthy, $500. Credit score below our minimum threshold, 502. Inability to verify employment or income claims. Previous landlord references could not be verified. Phone numbers disconnected or incorrect. Additionally, Ms. Parker's rental history shows a pattern of lease violations, property damage, and financial irresponsibility that makes her an unacceptable risk for our property. Please note that this decision is final and cannot be appealed. I appreciate your diligence in following proper procedures for tenant additions. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Best regards, Daniel Chen. I read it twice, feeling a surge of vindication so strong it made my hands shake. Then I forwarded it to Madison with a brief message. Got the results from Mr. Chen. I'm so sorry. I had no idea there would be issues. I copied my entire family on the email. My phone rang. 30 seconds later, my mother. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Kyle, voicemail, Madison, Jennifer, my father. I silenced my phone and went to make myself coffee, humming under my breath. The text started pouring in. Mom, call me right now. There's been a mistake. Kyle, this is ridiculous. You must have told your landlord something about Madison. Jennifer, I can't believe you would sabotage your own cousin like this. What kind of person are you, Madison? Jenna, please, can we talk? There's an explanation for all of this. I sipped my coffee and watched them accumulate on my screen like digital fireworks. 20 minutes later, my mother tried a different approach. Mom, your father and I are very disappointed in you. Madison is in tears. She's family, and you've humiliated her. I typed out a response, taking my time. Me, I didn't humiliate anyone. I submitted her application like I said I would. Mr. Chen makes his own decisions based on objective criteria. Didn't even know about any of this until I got his email. Mom, those evictions are all misunderstandings. Madison has explained everything. That landlord in Sacramento was a slumlord who was trying to steal her deposit. The one in Portland was a mistake in the records. You could have explained this to your landlord instead of just accepting his decision. I stared at the text, amazed at how quickly my mother had swallowed Madison's lies. In my first life, I'd been the one trying desperately to explain, to make people understand what Madison had done. No one had believed me. Now the shoe was on the other foot, and it felt glorious. Me. Mr. Chen runs his own background checks. I don't have any control over what he finds or how he interprets it. If there were mistakes in Madison's records, she should work on getting those corrected. Kyle, you're being deliberately obtuse. You know what mom means. You could advocate for Madison with your landlord. You could co-sign for her or something. Me. The lease doesn't allow co-signing. Mr. Chen was very clear about that. Anyone living in the apartment has to be on the lease and has to pass screening. I'm sorry this didn't work out, but I did everything I could. That was the beautiful part. I'd done exactly what they asked. I'd been reasonable, cooperative, responsible. It wasn't my fault that Madison's history disqualified her. The texts kept coming, but I was done responding. I turned off my phone and went about my day. Sunday dinner was going to be interesting. I almost didn't go. The temptation to avoid the confrontation was strong. But I'd learned something in my first life, in those desperate months when I was trying to make my family understand what Madison had done. Avoiding the truth didn't make it go away. This time I was going to face it head on. I arrived exactly on time, carrying nothing. No pie, no wine, no peace offering. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one. My mother opened the door with a face like stone. "Jenna, Mom." She didn't move to let me in. "I hope you've thought about your behavior this week." "I have," I said. "I've thought about it a lot." And? "And I stand by everything I did. Can I come in, or are we having this conversation on the porch?" For a moment, I thought she might actually close the door in my face. Then she stepped aside, her lips pressed into that thin line of disapproval I knew so well. The house was full. Kyle and Jennifer were already there, stationed on the couch like judges at a tribunal. My father sat in his recliner, his face neutral but his posture tense. And Madison was curled up in the armchair by the window, her eyes red-rimmed, a tissue clutched in her hand. The performance was already underway. "Jenna," Madison said, her voice small and broken, "thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "Why wouldn't I?" I asked, genuinely curious about what narrative she'd spun. After what happened, after you sent that email to everyone, I felt so exposed, so humiliated." I blinked. "I forwarded you the landlord's response and copied the family because I thought you'd want their support. Was I supposed to keep it a secret?" "You could have called me first," Madison said, tears spilling over. "You could have warned me what he was going to say. Instead, I found out along with everyone else that my private business was being shared with the whole family." The audacity was breathtaking. She was trying to make this about privacy, about me betraying her trust, rather than about the 4 evictions and the fraud and the lies. "Your private business," I repeated slowly, "is the reason you couldn't be added to my lease. I thought you'd want family to know the truth so they could understand the situation." "The truth?" Madison's voice rose, trembling with emotion. "That email was full of lies and misunderstandings. I've been trying all week to explain to everyone that this is a mistake, that Mr. Chen clearly has bad information. 4 evictions is bad information?" I interrupted. The room went silent. Madison's mouth opened and closed. "Those were..." I explained those. "They're all from misunderstandings with landlords who..." 4 different landlords," I continued, my voice calm and factual. "In 4 different cities. All misunderstood you the exact same way. That's quite a coincidence." "Jenna," my mother said sharply, "that's enough. Madison has been through a very difficult time, and she doesn't need you attacking her." "I'm not attacking her. I'm stating facts from a background check." "A background check you insisted on," Kyle interjected, "when you could have just let her move in and dealt with the landlord later." "Dealt with him how?" I asked. "By violating my lease? By having an unauthorized occupant and risking my own eviction?" "It wouldn't have come to that," Jennifer said dismissively. "You're being dramatic." I looked at her, this woman who'd never liked me, who'd always treated me like I was less than. "Am I? Because it sounds like you're asking me to risk my housing, my credit, and my financial stability for someone who has 4 evictions and a court judgment for unpaid rent." "She's family," my father said, speaking for the first time. His voice was quiet, but heavy with disappointment. "Family helps family." And there it was, the trump card, the ultimate guilt trip. In my first life, that would have been enough. I would have crumbled, I would have apologized, made excuses, found some way to fix this that put everyone's needs above my own, but I died because of that impulse. I died alone and broken because I'd helped family right off a cliff. "You're right," I said. "Family should help family, which is why I submitted Madison's application like you all asked me to. I did exactly what you wanted. It's not my fault she didn't qualify." "You could have fought for her," my mother said. "You could have explained to Mr. Chen that she's a good person who's had some bad luck." 4 evictions isn't bad luck. It's a pattern." Madison made a choking sound. "How can you be so cruel? I thought we were close. I thought you cared about me." The tears were flowing freely now, and I watched my family's faces harden with judgment. Against me. For her, just like last time. I do care about you, I said, and I meant it in a way they'd never understand. I cared enough to learn from my mistakes. I cared enough not to let her destroy me again. That's why I made sure this was done properly, through the right channels. If Mr. Chen's screening found problems, those are real problems that would have come up eventually. Better to know now than after you'd moved in and we were both stuck in a bad situation. There wouldn't have been a bad situation, Madison insisted. I would have paid my rent. I would have been a perfect roommate. Like you were in Sacramento? I asked softly. Or Seattle, or Phoenix, or Portland? Her face went white. I don't know what happened in those places, I continued. I don't know if the evictions were justified or if you were genuinely treated unfairly, but I know that my landlord has a right to protect his property, and I have a right to protect myself. 4 evictions is a red flag. The unpaid judgment is a red flag. The credit score is a red flag. I'm sorry that hurts to hear, but it's the truth. How dare you? My mother breathed. How dare you stand there and lecture your cousin about the consequences of her choices? I finished. Someone should. You all keep making excuses for her, keep bailing her out, keep pretending that she's just had bad luck, when the reality is that she keeps making the same mistakes over and over. That's not fair, Kyle said. You don't know what Madison's been through. You're right. I agreed. I don't know the whole story, but I know enough to protect myself. Jennifer stood up, her face flushed with anger. You've always been jealous of Madison? Always. She's beautiful and talented, and you're just bitter that nobody notices you when she's around. The insult hung in the air, and I felt something inside me settle into place. This was who they were. This was who they'd always been. I hadn't seen it clearly before because I'd been too close, too desperate for their approval, but I saw it now. Maybe I am bitter, I said quietly. Maybe I am jealous, but I'm also not homeless, not evicted, and not lying to my family about my rental history, so I'm going to count my blessings. I turned toward the door. If you leave now, my mother said, her voice shaking, don't expect to be welcomed back. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, and looked back at her, at all of them. My family. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, who were supposed to support me, who were supposed to have my back. The people who had chosen Madison over me without a second thought. Okay, I said simply, and I walked out. The next 3 months were the quietest of my life. No Sunday dinners, no family group chats, no calls from my mother, or surprise visits from Kyle, or passive-aggressive texts from Jennifer. I was officially exiled, and it was wonderful. I threw myself into my job, taking on extra projects, building my portfolio, making myself indispensable. In my first life, I'd been so distracted by the drama with Madison and the mounting financial crisis that I'd let my work slide. I'd missed deadlines, shown up late, been too stressed to focus. This time, I was thriving. My supervisor, Karen, noticed. You've really stepped up lately. The client loved your mock-ups for the Sanderson campaign. Thanks, I said, feeling a genuine smile spread across my face. I'm enjoying the work. It shows. She hesitated. I know you're technically junior level, but I'm thinking about recommending you for the senior designer opening. Interested? In my first life, that promotion had gone to someone else. I'd been too much of a mess to even be considered. Very interested, I said. Good. Keep up the good work. I celebrated by taking myself out to dinner. A real dinner at a nice restaurant, not the instant ramen I'd lived on while trying to pay Madison's rent. I ordered wine, I ordered dessert. I sat alone in a booth and felt more content than I had in years. Both lives combined. My phone buzzed halfway through my pasta. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won out. Hello? Jenna? It's Madison. I set down my fork very carefully. How did you get this number? I've always had it. Her voice was different. No tears, no breathy vulnerability, just flat and tired. I'm calling from a friend's phone. You blocked me. Yes, I did. I need to talk to you. I don't think we have anything to say to each other. Please. And there was the emotion again, creeping back in. Just give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I should have hung up, Every instinct I'd honed over 4 years of suffering and death told me to end the call, block this number too, finish my dinner in peace. But I was curious. What could she possibly say? What angle was she working now? 5 minutes, I said. Starting now. I'm sorry. I laughed. I couldn't help it. You're sorry. I am. I know you don't believe me, but I am. I've been doing a lot of thinking since everything happened. And you were right. About the evictions, about my history. I do have a pattern. Okay? I'm in therapy now. My parents insisted on it after... She stopped. After some things came out. Things about why I got evicted from those other places. Things I hadn't told anyone. Like the unlicensed Airbnb you were running in Phoenix? Silence. Or the credit card fraud in Portland? Or the restraining order from your ex in Seattle? More silence. Madison, I'm not interested in your apology or your therapy revelation. You can work on yourself all you want, but I'm done being part of your story. I'm not asking you to be. Her voice was small again. I wanted you to know that I know. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. And I'm sorry. You haven't hurt me, I said. And it was true. I didn't let you. My mom said you won't come to family dinners anymore. That's between me and your aunt. They blame you, you know, for what happened. They think you could have done more to help me. I know they do. It's not fair. I almost laughed again. No, it's not. But that's how it is. Do you think... She hesitated. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? For what? I asked. You haven't actually done anything to me yet. Yet? Her voice sharpened. What does that mean? It means, I said slowly, that I stopped you before you could do what you did to those other landlords. Before you could rack up unpaid rent in my name and forge my signature and destroy my credit. I learned from other people's mistakes. I wouldn't have... Yes, I interrupted. You would have. You've done it 4 times. There's no reason to think I would have been different. She was crying now. I could hear it. That's not fair. You don't know what I would have done. You're right, I agreed. I don't know, and I'll never know, because I protected myself instead of giving you the chance. I hate you, she whispered. I know, I said. 5 minutes are up. I ended the call and blocked the number. Then I finished my pasta, ordered tiramisu, and went home to my loft, my beautiful, peaceful Madison-free loft, and slept better than I had in 2 lifetimes. The promotion came through 6 weeks later. Senior designer with a 30% raise and my own office. Karen made the announcement at the team meeting, and my coworkers applauded. I felt tears prick my eyes, the good kind, the kind that came from achievement and recognition. In my first life, I'd never made it past junior designer. I'd been fired at 24, scrambling for freelance work while living in progressively worse apartments, never able to get back on my feet. This time, I was moving up. I called my parents that night to tell them. It was the first time I'd initiated contact since I walked out of Sunday dinner. My mother answered on the 3rd ring. Jenna. Hi, Mom. I have some news. Oh? Her voice was carefully neutral. I got a promotion at work. Senior designer. Silence. That's wonderful, honey. Congratulations. Thank you. More silence. Then, will we see you Sunday? And there it was. The peace offering, extended on my terms. I'd achieved something, proved myself, and now I was worth welcoming back. But the invitation came with an unspoken condition. Don't mention Madison. Don't bring up the past. Pretend everything is fine. I don't think so, I said gently. I'm pretty busy with the new role. Jenna. My mother's voice cracked. It's been almost 4 months. Don't you think it's time to let this go? Let what go? This grudge, this vendetta against Madison? She made mistakes, yes, but she's trying to do better. We all are. But you're the one who won't forgive. I sat down on my couch, looking around my loft. The exposed brick I'd loved. The windows I'd washed myself. The hardwood floors I'd refinished. the space that was entirely, completely mine. I don't have a vendetta against Madison, I said. I protected myself from someone with a documented history of causing problems. That's not a grudge. That's common sense. She's family. So am I. What does that mean? It means, I said, that when you had to choose between believing me or believing her, you chose her. Every single time. You didn't ask for my side. You didn't consider that maybe, just maybe, I had a valid reason for being cautious. You just assumed I was being selfish and cruel. That's not. It is, Mom. And I'm okay with it. Really. I understand that Madison is the golden child, and I'm just me. I've made my peace with that. But I'm not going to set myself on fire to keep her warm. Not anymore. What happened to you? My mother asked, and she sounded genuinely bewildered. You used to be so sweet, so accommodating. I grew up, I said. I learned to set boundaries. Boundaries, she repeated, like it was a foreign word. Is that what therapy is teaching you? I wasn't in therapy, but the assumption was telling. Something like that. Well, I think it's making you hard, cynical. Maybe, I agreed. Or maybe I'm just not a doormat anymore. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. I never raised you to be disrespectful. You raised me to put everyone else first, I corrected. To sacrifice my own needs, my own safety, my own happiness for the sake of family harmony. And I'm done with that. Jenna, I love you, Mom. I really do. But I can't be who you want me to be anymore. I have to be who I need to be. And who is that? I smiled. Someone who survives. Christmas came and went without me. I spent it alone in my loft, watching movies and eating takeout Chinese food, and it was the best Christmas I'd ever had. No forced cheer, no passive-aggressive comments, no watching Madison open expensive gifts for my parents while I got a candle and a book I'd never read. Just peace. New Year's Eve, I went to a party thrown by coworkers. I wore a dress I'd bought with my promotion bonus. Deep blue velvet that made me feel elegant instead of invisible. I drank champagne. I laughed at jokes. I kissed a guy from accounting at midnight, and it didn't lead anywhere, but it was nice. I was living. In my first life, I'd spent New Year's Eve in that roach-infested studio, alone, watching my credit score drop and wondering how I'd ended up there. I'd made a resolution to fix everything, to get back on track, to somehow salvage the disaster my life had become. 3 weeks later, I was dead. This time, I made a different resolution. To never forget what I'd learned. To never let anyone convince me that protecting myself was selfish. To trust my instincts, even when everyone else told me I was wrong. To survive. February brought another email from Daniel Chen. Ms. Morrison, your lease is up for renewal in 30 days. Please let me know if you intend to renew. Current rent is $1,450 a month. Renewal rate would be $1,125 a month, reflecting standard market increase. As a reminder, you've been an excellent tenant. No late payments, no complaints, property maintained in good condition. I'd be happy to have you stay. Best regards, Daniel Chen. I stared at the email, remembering. In my first life, this renewal notice had been the beginning of the end. Madison had forged my signature. We'd both been on the lease, and then everything had fallen apart. This time, it was just me, just my name, just my responsibility. I typed my response. Mr. Chen, I'd like to renew for another year. Thank you. His reply was almost instant. Excellent. I'll send the renewal lease by end of week. It felt like winning the lottery. The lease arrived on Thursday. 12 pages, single-spaced, meticulously detailed. I read every word, remembering how I'd skimmed it the first time, so excited to have my own place that I hadn't noticed all the clauses about joint and several liability, about unauthorized occupants, about lease violations. This time, I understood exactly what I was signing. Only my name went on the signature line. I scanned it, emailed it back, and felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was still carrying. I was safe. I was stable. I was free. March brought an unexpected visitor. I was home on a Saturday, cleaning and listening to music, when someone knocked on my door. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my building had a security buzzer that everyone was supposed to use. But something made me check the peephole. Madison. She looked different. Thinner, tired, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of the perfect waves she usually wore. She was carrying a large tote bag, and she looked nervous. Every instinct told me not to open the door. I opened it anyway, but kept the chain on. "What do you want?" "Hi," she said, attempting a smile that didn't quite work. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I wanted to return your things." "My things?" She hefted the tote bag. "Stuff I borrowed over the years. Clothes, books, that necklace you let me wear to my cousin's wedding. I've been holding on to it all, and I thought I should give it back." I stared at the bag, then at her. "Why?" "Because it's yours. Because I should have returned it years ago. Because..." She trailed off, then sighed. "Because my therapist said making amends is part of recovery." "Recovery from what?" "From being a shitty person," she said bluntly. "Can I come in? Just for a minute?" I should have said no. Every ounce of self-preservation I'd cultivated over the past year screamed at me to take the bag, close the door, and forget she existed. But curiosity won again. I unchained the door and let her in. She stood in my entryway, looking around with an expression I couldn't quite read. "It's nice. You've done a lot with the place." "Thanks. I saw your social media," she continued. "The promotion, the award you won for that ad campaign. You're doing really well." "I am." She set the bag down on my coffee table and started pulling things out. A black cardigan I'd forgotten about. 3 books I'd loaned her and never gotten back. A pair of earrings. The necklace she'd mentioned, a simple silver chain that had been my grandmother's. "I'm sorry I kept these so long," she said. "I kept meaning to give them back, and then, I don't know, time passed." "It's fine." "It's not." She looked at me directly, for the first time. "Nothing about how I treated you was fine. I used you. I took advantage of your kindness. And when you tried to protect yourself, I turned everyone against you." I said nothing. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Madison continued. "I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did. The evictions, the unpaid rent, the lies, all of it. I'm not making excuses anymore." "What happened?" I asked. "After the lease thing fell through?" She laughed bitterly. "Reality happened. My parents finally saw the background check you sent around. They confronted me about the evictions, the judgment, all of it. I tried to lie, but they hired a lawyer to look into everything. He found more than I wanted them to know." "The Airbnb scheme? The credit card fraud?" Her face flushed. "Yeah, among other things. They were furious. They cut me off financially, put me in therapy, made me get a real job. I'm working as a server now, living with a roommate in a tiny apartment, paying back everyone I owe. It's been humbling." "Good," I said, and I meant it. "I tried to tell them it wasn't fair," Madison continued, "that you had sabotaged me, that you'd told the landlord lies. But they didn't believe me this time. They said I'd used up all my second chances. Did you tell them you were planning to forge my signature on the lease renewal?" Her eyes widened. "How did you—" "Because that's what you did in Sacramento," I said. "And Phoenix. And Seattle. It's your pattern. Move in with someone, stop paying rent, forge their signature to extend the lease, then disappear when the eviction starts." She sank down onto my couch without being invited, her face in her hands. "I wasn't going to do that to you." "Yes, you were. She stopped, then laughed weakly. "Yeah, I probably was. It's what I always did. It was easy, and I was good at it, and I always convinced myself that the people I was screwing over could handle it. They couldn't," I said. "I couldn't?" She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I know I'm so sorry, Jenna. I'm so sorry." And standing there, looking at my cousin, this person who had been simultaneously my greatest threat and completely neutralized, I felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness, not quite, but something close to it. A sort of distant compassion for someone who'd finally hit rock bottom and was trying to climb back out. "I hope therapy helps," I said. "I hope you figure out how to be better." "Are we—" She hesitated. "Are we ever going to be okay?" As a family? I don't know, I said honestly. That's not really up to me. That's up to you, and whether you can actually change. And it's up to them, whether they can accept that I'm allowed to have boundaries. They miss you, Madison said. Aunt Patty especially. She talks about you all the time. Does she understand why I left? I think she's starting to. Now that she knows the truth about me, she's realizing that maybe you weren't being unreasonable. That must be a nice change. Madison stood, wiping her eyes. I should go. I just wanted to return your stuff and say what I needed to say. I walked her to the door. Madison? Yeah? I don't forgive you. I'm not ready for that, and I might never be. But I hope you actually do the work. I hope you become someone who doesn't hurt people. She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. Thank you for even saying that much. After she left, I looked at the pile of returned items on my coffee table. Small things, mostly. Nothing that had really mattered in the grand scheme of my life. But the fact that she'd returned them mattered. It meant something had shifted, some crack in the pattern that had defined her for so long. Maybe she'd change. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, I was safe from her. My mother called the next day. Madison said she saw you yesterday. She did, I confirmed. She returned some things she'd borrowed. She also said you two talked. About everything. We did. A long pause. I owe you an apology. I almost dropped my phone. What? Your father and I? We've been doing a lot of thinking. A lot of talking with Madison's therapist, actually. She helped us see some patterns we'd been enabling. Some behaviors we should have addressed years ago. I sat down, my heart pounding. Okay. You were right to protect yourself, my mother said, and her voice was thick with emotion. You were right not to trust her. We should have listened to you instead of assuming you were being difficult. Mom, please, let me finish. I've been a terrible mother to you. I favored Madison because she was exciting, dramatic. She needed us, or at least we thought she did. And you were so independent, so capable. We took you for granted. Tears were running down my face now. I just wanted you to believe me. I know. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. We both cried for a minute, separated by phone lines, but connected by something we'd never quite managed before. Honesty. Can you forgive me? My mother asked finally. Can we try to rebuild? I don't know, I said. I need time. I need to know that things will actually be different. They will be, I promise. Madison's in therapy, your father and I are in counseling, and we're all working on being better, being the family you deserved all along. That's good. Will you come to dinner next Sunday? Just you, me, and Dad. No Madison, no Kyle and Jennifer, just us. I thought about it. The old me would have agreed immediately, desperate for any crumb of acceptance. The new me, the one who died and come back and learned to protect herself, was more cautious. But I was also curious and hopeful, despite everything. Okay, I said. I'll come. The dinner was awkward at first. We sat around the same table where they'd pressured me to add Madison to my lease, and the ghosts of that conversation hung in the air. But my parents made an effort. Real effort. My father asked about my job and actually listened to the answer. My mother showed me pictures of her garden and didn't once mention how I should settle down and find a husband. We talked about neutral things, movies, books, the weather, and then, over dessert, my mother said, "Tell me about the loft. I never really got to see it properly when we helped you move in." So I told her about the exposed brick in the windows, about refinishing the floors and hanging the curtains, about how I'd turned the second bedroom into an office where I worked on freelance projects. "It sounds beautiful," she said. "I'd like to see it sometime, if you'd be comfortable with that." "I would," I said, and meant it. Rebuilding took time. Sunday dinners became a sometimes thing. Once a month, then twice, gradually working back toward weekly. Kyle and Jennifer were there occasionally, and the dynamic was different. They were less smug, more respectful. I wasn't sure if Madison's implosion had humbled them or if my own success had earned their regard. But either way, it was better. Madison herself I saw rarely. She came to Thanksgiving sober and quiet, working her serving job and living small. She sat at the opposite end of the table and didn't try to engage me beyond basic pleasantries. It was the most comfortable I'd ever been in her presence. At Christmas, my mother gave me a beautiful photo album. "I went through our old pictures," she explained. "I realized I had hundreds of Madison and barely any of you, so I made this. Your childhood, your achievements, your life, the one I should have been paying attention to all along." I flipped through it with tears in my eyes. Me at my first art show in high school, me graduating college, me in my first apartment, me at my first job, all the moments I'd thought no one was noticing. "Thank you," I whispered. "No," my mother said. "Thank you for giving us another chance." 2 years after my rebirth, I got another email from Daniel Chen. "Ms. Morrison, I wanted to reach out with a business proposition. I'm planning to renovate the building at 447 Morrison Street, converting it from rental units to condos. As a long-term tenant in good standing, I'm offering you first right of refusal on purchasing your unit. Current asking price, $245,000. Given your rental history and the renovations you've personally completed, I'm willing to offer you a discount, $215,000. This is a significant investment, so take your time considering it. I'm happy to discuss financing options and answer any questions. Best regards, Daniel Chen." I read the email 3 times, my heart racing. In my first life, I died in debt with destroyed credit, unable to rent a decent apartment, let alone buy one. This life, I had savings. I had good credit. I had a stable job with a good salary. I could buy it. I could actually buy my loft. I scheduled a meeting with Daniel Chen, bringing my financial documents and a list of questions. He walked me through everything: the renovation plans, the HOA structure, the financing options. "You've been an ideal tenant," he said as we wrapped up. "Honestly, if more people took care of their spaces the way you've taken care of this one, property management would be easy." "Thank you," I said. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you remember Madison Parker? The application you denied 2 years ago?" His expression darkened slightly. "I do. Why?" "She's my cousin. My family was pressuring me to add her to the lease." "I see." He studied me carefully. "And now? Now I'm wondering if you ever found out what happened with her other evictions. If the landlords ever collected on the judgments." He pulled up something on his computer, typed for a moment, then shook his head. "According to the latest credit report I pulled for our records, she still has outstanding debts. The Sacramento judgment was never paid, neither was the one in Phoenix. She's on a payment plan for Portland, but she's already missed 2 payments. So she's still doing it? Looks like it." He closed the laptop. "Ms. Morrison, can I speak frankly? Please? When I see a pattern like your cousin's, I know I'm not just looking at bad luck. I'm looking at someone who deliberately exploits the system and the people around them. You did the right thing. Protecting yourself. A lot of people in your situation would have caved to family pressure. I almost did," I admitted. "But you didn't. And now you're here, looking at buying your own place, while she's still running from creditors. That's not a coincidence." I thought about that as I drove home. About the version of me who died at 27, broken and alone. About the version of me sitting here now, 2 years into a second chance, about to become a homeowner. The difference wasn't luck. It was choice. I'd chosen to protect myself. I'd chosen to set boundaries. I'd chosen to survive. And I was still choosing it every day. I closed on the loft in April, 4 years after my rebirth, 3 years before my death day in the first life. My family came to the housewarming party, even Madison, who brought a plant and congratulated me quietly before leaving early. My coworkers came. My friends from the gym I'd joined. People from the local art collective I'd started volunteering with. My loft was full of life and laughter and warmth. Karen from work raised a glass of champagne and a toast. To Jenna, who turned a rental into a home and a home into an asset. May your property value always increase and your neighbors always be quiet. Everyone laughed and drank, and I looked around at the exposed brick walls I'd loved, the windows I'd washed, the floors I'd refinished. This place had saved me. Or rather, saving this place had saved me. My mother found me later, standing by the window and looking out at the city lights. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. "Just thinking about how different things could have been," I said. "Different how?" I couldn't tell her about the first life, about dying alone and broken, but I could tell her a version of the truth. "If I'd let Madison move in," I said, "if I'd ignored the background check and added her to the lease like you all wanted, I think I'd have lost all of this." My mother was quiet for a long moment. "You're probably right. And I'm sorry we pushed you. We were so focused on helping Madison that we didn't stop to think about what it would cost you." "Do you think she's going to be okay?" I asked. "Really okay?" "I don't know," my mother admitted. "She's still struggling, still making mistakes, but she's trying. And that's something. More than we saw from her before." "That's good." "But you," my mother continued, putting her arm around me, "you're going to be more than okay. You already are." I leaned into her, embrace, feeling the solid reality of this moment, this life, this second chance I'd somehow been given. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." Epilogue. 5 years after my rebirth, I was 31 years old, 4 years older than I'd ever been in my first life. I'd been promoted again to creative director. I'd sold 2 of my own photography pieces to a real gallery. I'd paid off my mortgage early. I'd traveled to Iceland and Japan and Morocco, taking pictures and living the artist life Madison had only pretended to want. I'd dated, broken up, dated again. I'd made real friends who valued me for myself, not for what I could do for them. I'd built a life that was mine, completely and entirely mine. Madison was still working at the restaurant, still in therapy, still trying to rebuild her credit and her reputation. We saw each other at family gatherings, exchanged pleasantries, maintained a cordial distance. She'd never become the person I'd been in my first life. She'd never gotten the chance to destroy someone that way again, but she was trying to be better. And that was something. My parents and I had rebuilt our relationship into something healthier, with boundaries and mutual respect. Kyle and Jennifer treated me as an equal. The family dynamic had shifted, rebalanced. And sometimes, late at night in my loft, my condo, my property, my home, I thought about that other life. The one where I'd died at 27, broken and alone. I thought about the woman I'd been, drowning in debt and despair, and I wished I could go back and tell her, "Hold on, protect yourself. You're worth more than their approval. You deserve to survive." But I couldn't go back to that life. I could only live this one. And I was living it fully, fiercely, freely. I'd been given a second chance, and I'd seized it with both hands. I'd rewritten my story. And this time, I got to choose the ending.